Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I can see you all right here. Can I get a little bit of like roof raising for Cabo? I know Jacob's stoked. Cabo is absolutely fantastic. I'll just say that when we went there was it 20? Yeah, it was 2020. All you can eat shrimp tacos. People like I was double fisting tacos on the way back to the airport just because of how phenomenal fresh seafood is on the coast of Mexico. And scuba diving with Phil Bolander in the mornings. It's just absolutely wonderful. So the trip that is super exciting. So my objective today, by the way, like Jason said, my objective is to help you gain some momentum over the course of the next 3 weeks. I know, Kylie, the tacos are just phenomenal. I can't say enough about them. But my objective is to really help you put into practice what you learned over the course of the conference. How many of you feel like you got some value out of the conference? Right? It absolutely phenomenal, Sarah Chell. And I want to give you some value on why you should work hard now. And then I want to give you some tools, some practical knowledge. Hopefully you can get some nuggets out of that for how to build that momentum over the course of the next 3 weeks. So does everybody have the handout? Give me a thumbs up. Cool. Awesome. Go ahead and open that up. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a little bit of time to journal a little bit, so to speak. The first question in the handout at the very top says, why is it important that you create sales momentum over the course of the next 3 weeks? So I want you to brainstorm, why is it important that you really maximize what you can do? And for some of you, by the way, as really busy students, that might be a couple orders a week. For some of you, that might be 5 to 10 orders a week. And for some of you, that might be really going all out to gain momentum in the next 3 weeks. But I want you to go ahead and take some time. I'm going to give you 2 to 3 minutes to write down in your notes, why is it important for you personally to build some sales momentum over the next 3 weeks? I see some of you vibing. That's good. Is it a pay raise that you should get the next 3 weeks? Maybe it's having more leads so that you can crush the push when it comes. Maybe like Dane said, it's a time to re-oil the gears. I'm going to start fresh. Give you another 20 seconds. Write down as many reasons as you can think of why it's important for you to create sales momentum. Maybe you got to pay some bills. All right, give me a thumbs up if you got some things down, why it's important for you to create some sales momentum. Drop them in the chat box. Give me 1 or 2. Give me your top 1. All right, hang on. Let me stretch the chat box out here because this is going to get blown up. Not get rusty. Kristen, I literally had that in my notes as well. Break off some of the rust. Build some savings. I love that. Thank you, Sarah. Earn a scholarship, Connor. That's probably, I can see how that'd be on the line. Money for self-care. I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Holiday Kako. Thank you, Alex. Let's see. Pay tuition, gain more knowledge, build savings account, learn confidence, get leads for winter break. Cabo San Lucas is on the line. Money for school, intensity, muscle building. I loved Dane's talk. That was incredible. Christmas money. Thank you, Isabel. I had that one down as well. You know, How many of you have had Christmas before, Christmases before, well, we'll just say holidays before, where you maybe didn't have as much money to buy people some gifts, right? Has anybody been kind of like loaded around the holiday season and been able to buy somebody like a really nice gift, something that was like really meaningful? Like there is a difference there. I'm not saying that, you know, our holidays should be about consumerism, but it is nice to be able to have the opportunity to be able to do that. Reach goals, shopping. Yeah, shopping for yourself. I love that. Get financially back on track. Good experience for your resume. I love it. And you guys can steal some of those, by the way. If you heard me read out some of those and you were like, oh, that's a good one, I want to put that down as well, please do. So there are a lot of reasons why you want to build some momentum. And let me ask you this. How many of you have kind of fallen off track of what you would have liked to have done with Vector when you first started? Anybody like have ideas of what the job was going to be like when you started this semester? Yeah, I see some hand raising here. That, you know, when you started the job, maybe if you started this semester or even in the summertime, you rolled into the semester going, you know what, I'm going to do this many appointments a week and this is what my schedule is going to look like. And your enthusiasm has kind of dwindled. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Like at this point, that maybe you've only been on the job for 2 or 3 weeks and you're feeling that right now. Now is the time to get back on track. I'm going to tell you that the semester, as you probably already know, is only going to get a little bit more complicated. If you don't start building the momentum now, it's going to be harder to do that as things go on and start to progress. So that is one of the reasons why it's important to just get the ball rolling right now and to start off creating that momentum right now. By the way, again, that momentum is different for everybody. You might fit in the 1 to 3 categories. Some of you, creating momentum is just getting on the sales report every single week, maybe 1 to 3 orders. For some of you, that's 5 to 7 orders. And for some of you, you know, you should be shooting for 10 plus orders because of the lack of school. And this is your full-time thing. I'll also tell you that one of the reasons why you should be working on really hard right now, Buddy, the elf, talked about how the holidays, Christmas selling is coming up. I got to tell you something as well. Christmas selling actually started 300 days ago. Did you guys know that we sell Christmas gifts 364 days out of the year? I have sold Christmas gifts on January 1st to a customer, going back to Dane's point, to a customer who was like, man, if you would have called me before Christmas, we would have totally bought all these gifts for everybody. And I said, well, why don't you buy them for next Christmas? And it was a New Year's Day demo. And she went, that's actually a pretty good idea. So she bought all the Christmas gifts for 300 days in advance so that way she had those things ready to go. And all she had to do was pull them out of the closet. So now is like I'll just let you know, we've done, I don't know, probably half of our Christmas shopping already. So now is your time to really maximize on that. If you wait till December, you're kind of capitalizing on like the later part of the season, so to speak, for the gifts. And it's a really good time right now to start talking about those gifts. So let me give you some nuggets on how to do that. First of all, I think it's important to understand a couple of time management things. Just out of curiosity, how many of you were at our SC2 conference during the summer? Just by show of hands. Okay, cool. Awesome. So some of these nuggets, by the way, you might have already gotten out of Buddy's talk during SC2. But I'm going to reshare a couple things because I was a Cutco representative for 6 semesters during college before I graduated and opened up an office. And so there's some things that I learned about time management and really managing things throughout this semester that I think you might get some value out of. And so I'm going to go ahead and share a couple slides with you. And this is on your handout, by the way, so you don't necessarily need to take all these things down, but I want to give you a little bit of a visual of what I'm talking about. So there exists an object lesson about a jar and filling things in the jar. So the object lesson is this. A professor comes out to a class and he's got 4 buckets. He's got a bucket full of big rocks, small rocks, gravel, and sand. And he has a student come in he has a student come up and fill up this jar. And he tells him, hey, I want you to fit all these things in the jar. And the student proceeds to put the sand in, and then the gravel, and then the small rocks. And as you can imagine, the big rocks didn't fit in there very well. You've got to start with the big things first. So when it comes to time management, it's important that you put the big rocks in first. Then you can put the small rocks in around that. Then you can put the gravel in and shake it in around that. And then the sand. And then even then, you can still crack a Coke and pour it in a jar like that, because you always have time for a Coke with a friend. Right. And so it's one of those things where if you fill your schedule the right way, you can make sure that you are also succeeding at school and you're also succeeding at Vector. How many of you felt like the tension almost between like, do I do good at Vector or do I do good at school? And you've almost kind of like felt like you've done really well on one week, and then you kind of had to like pause on one and catch up on the other week, and you play this kind of like back and forth game. Or has anybody experienced what I call Vector guilt? where like you're working hard on skill. Yeah, everybody knows what that is. Where you're working really hard on school and you're actually worrying about doing presentations, but you're not doing presentations because you're not necessarily planning your time or managing it. And then you get to the end of the week and you're worried about doing presentations all week long and you actually didn't do any presentations, and then you feel guilty and then you stop answering your manager's phone calls, and then you just kind of go through that cycle. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Cool. That's a really normal thing. What I want to give you is a couple keys to be able to negotiate that. So you got to fill your jar with intention. So in order to do that, there are 4 things that you got to put in your schedule every week. And I would suggest to you that by planning out the next couple of weeks, like I'm going to show you how to do, is going to be something that's going to give you a large advantage, especially in a week-to-week homework test kind of basis, so that you can manage a lot of those highs and lows. So the first thing you got to put in your schedule are the big rocks. But before I talk about the big rocks, we got to talk about Parkinson's law of time management. How many have heard of this before? That work expands so as to fill the activity that you give it time for. So for example, ladies and gentlemen, if I told you had a once in a lifetime trip to go to Cabo San Lucas tomorrow, and I told you that you had an hour to pack before we had to hop on a flight, how long would it take you to pack? You'd pack in 10 minutes. Yeah, some of you, it might take you all hour to pack. If I told you that you had 30 minutes to pack, how long would it take you to pack? If I said, we got to hop on a plane in 5 minutes, I'm going to be at your house driving to O'Hare or Salt Lake City Airport or whatever, and you had 5 minutes to pack, how long would it take you to pack? It would take you 5 minutes. You would be like, all right, I'm going to throw some stuff in a bag and we'll figure it out along the way. Right. And so that is the way it would work. So it's the same thing with your school. How many of you have been guilty of saying, and not necessarily guilty, but how many of you have said before, like, I just work better under pressure? How many of you have written some really great reports at like 10 o'clock at night and the deadline was at midnight? You don't necessarily work better under pressure, Evan. You just work better focused. So if I might, I'm going to give you a couple keys on that. So first thing, we got to put the big chunks in first. And the big chunk, number 1, is your have tos. Have tos are things that have a specific time and an immediate negative consequence. Those are really things that are really easy to put in your schedule. Doctor's appointments, team meetings, classes, things that are non-negotiable about when they go in your schedule. You got to put those things in there first. I don't really need to spend a whole lot of time on that. Conceptually, I think you understand what that is. Then you got to put the need tos in there. And most people, when they build a schedule, are pretty good at putting need tos in their schedule, Kylie. And the need tos are things that still need to get done today. You might have a homework assignment that's due today or a quiz. You need to eat sometime in this 24-hour cycle. You probably need to sleep sometime in this 24-hour cycle. But when you do that is fluid. Does everybody follow that? Like, you don't necessarily have to eat at 7 o'clock every morning unless you have some severe dietary blood sugar restrictions, in which case that might be a have to. But for most of us, that's a flexible item. Things that you should do are really what create successful people. Should do's are things that have no specific time, Isabel, but also they don't have any immediate negative consequence. Most people are really good at putting should do's and have to's in their schedule, but have to's and need to's in their schedule. And that's all they do in their schedule is those. But very successful people, Pete, they put should do's in there as well. And should do's are things like personal development, right? These are proactive things that you can do. I use the example of checking your oil. How many of you have checked your oil before? Hopefully you know how to do that. If you don't check your oil, by the way, it might not affect you this month, might not affect you next month, but 6 months from now, if your car accidentally has a slow leak and you don't check the oil frequent enough, you're going to end up toasting the engine and paying $4,000 to pay for a new one, which we're picking up today, by the way. So check your oil, right? That happened. It's also a matter of things like personal development, right? Reading every single day. That's something that you should do. I think we all understand that inherently, but if you don't do it today, don't do it tomorrow, don't do it next week, it's not a big deal. But 2, 3 decades, years even from now, you're not going to be where you want to be at personally and in your business and with your intellectual life. Does that make sense? So those are things that make the biggest difference. That's also doing next week's homework. Has anybody ever done next week's homework a week in advance and felt how amazingly freeing that is when you've proactively done that? I remember I wrote a report. I did one of those 10 o'clock at night reports, and I got to class and the professor changed the deadline to the next Thursday. And I had no idea that he did that. It was the best report I ever wrote. So I had like 7 days to tweak that report in advance. I never did it again, but it's a great way to do school, is being proactive that way. And then finally, it's important that you put your want tos in your schedule. Your want tos are just as, if not important for all of you to put in your schedule as anything else. Here's why, because if you don't put your want tos in your schedules, you sacrifice other should do's and need tos for your want tos. How many of you know what I'm talking about? right? Friend says, oh, we should go hang out. Let's go party tonight, or let's go do something. And you're like, oh, I haven't hung out with my friends in a long time. I've been really working hard all week long, Maya. You know what? I can do this assignment a little bit later. And then you procrastinate that. And then you bounce, and then you get all stressed. How many of you know what I'm talking about? You get all stressed because you're like, oh, you get back from whatever activity you procrastinated from. You're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this really quick. Or you do the Netflix and homework thing, right? You work really hard for an hour on your homework, Rebecca, and then you're like, oh, you know what? I need a break. I'm going to watch Netflix. And then 4 hours later, you're like, oh my gosh, I've got all this homework I got to do. And you yo-yo back and forth between the things you want to and the things you need to be doing. And your should do's are just, you should all over yourself at that point. So it's important that you plan the want to's in there, because you'll be way more effective with the time that you do have by having your want to's. I used to plan, one of the things I used to do, just so you know, has anybody got sucked down the YouTube media, like the YouTube black hole? You know what I'm talking about? Just one movie. I love it. It's fun, actually. And that's totally fine to do, by the way, as long as you plan it. So I remember one semester, I planned out 8 to noon, I had class. From noon to 1, I planned lunch and YouTube black hole time. That's what I put it in my schedule as. So from 12 to 1, I could eat food at my apartment and watch as much YouTube as I wanted. But at 1 o'clock, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it was time to do homework again. And I needed to have a focused 3-hour session of homework. And so it's important to allow yourself those things. And then finally, well, before I come back to tips on time management, I want to show you a workbook. How many of you have some sort of scheduling thing, whether it's Google, like a Google Calendar or an iCalendar, or if you're in our division, you probably got a workbook. I'm going to show you an example of what you could use, and you're totally welcome to use it. In the handout, by the way, you actually all have a link to this. So let me show you where this is. You'll recognize the handout. At the bottom of the handout, there's this little link. And this link pulls you up to a schedule template that you can use for yourself. So here's what you'll do to use that, by the way. You'll all need to go and make a copy of this thing if you want to use it. Everybody catch that? Now, I'm going to walk you through a couple key things about this, and you don't necessarily have to use this template, although I did a pretty good job on it. But you don't necessarily have to use this template, but make sure that you have these keys, these tools at your fingertips in some way, shape, or form. So you can go to that link, make a copy, and you'll have your own version of this. Now, a couple things that I would really suggest that you have in your schedule. Obviously, you've got the big things. I would also go in and, you block off all the other things. And in case you're not familiar with how to do this, you drag, you drop, you make it a different color. Right? Let me show you an example of Destiny on our team. This is Destiny's workbook. So this is, and I got permission from her to show this. These are all her classes. She's got team meeting in there. She's got time that she's going to be driving home. She's got a Halloween party that she's going to be attending. She's got things like Key Staff and Champions Club all mapped out in here. Also, equally important, she's got all the assignments that she needs to do this week. How many of you, by the way, have felt so stressed out because you feel like you have a ton of assignments that you have to do, and it kind of just locks you down mentally on what you can accomplish, and you just kind of can't move until you get all those assignments done? I'm going to tell you that when you think of problems and things that you have to do in life in an abstract manner and you leave them floating around in your brain, it maintains a lot of your, in a computer science situation, you call it RAM, right? It maintains a lot of your energy that you're trying to do. But when you put all those things down on a to-do list and then you translate that to-do list in a schedule, then you have a sigh of relief, right, Maddie? Because all of a sudden you don't have to expend energy thinking about those things. They're in a time, in a place, in a specific time in your schedule where you know that it's possible to take care of those things. You don't have to worry about, what if I forget something? Somebody follow that? So if you're not making a weekly assignment list, I would definitely be doing that every single week, and not just doing that, but I would be plugging that in your schedule. When are you going to be doing certain assignments at what time? That would be Destiny's feedback on her schedule, is when is she going to be doing those specific assignments at what time? And then you'll notice that the money signs, in case you weren't aware, are the potential appointment spots that you have left in your schedule. So these are for your demos, right? And we counted it up here. Destiny's got 24 available demo spots this week. Her goal is simply to do 7. But when you're looking at how much extra space she has in her schedule to do that, it's way less overwhelming than being like, oh my gosh, I have all these things to do. How am I going to squeeze 7 demos in my schedule? Does everybody follow that? If that's resonating with you, give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Just wanted to see. Now, also in your schedule template, I would suggest to you that every single week, you should sit down and make a top 20 list. a top 20 customer list. And here's why. How many of you are guilty during phone jams? This is my second nugget of you to create momentum over the course of the next couple of weeks. And really what I wanted to just speak to is like having efficiency doing vector and school. By the way, if you're not doing school and your schedule's a little bit more wide open, still put in all those other things that you have going on. The principles are the same, but back in the day when I used to do appointments, right? Back in my day, one of the things that I used to do is I used to rewrite down my top 20 customers and their phone numbers at that time, because we didn't have a cool app, and their phone numbers, Eli. And I would fold it up, stick it in my back pocket. And anytime that I had a phone time or anytime that I was in between demos, I could pull that thing out of my back pocket, open it up and call people. But I already had premeditated who I was going to call to get appointments with. How many of you during phone jams, whether it's your weekly team meeting phone jam or you show up for Champions Club phone jam, are guilty of like the scroll game? Scroll, 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 call. Look at social media. Try, I'm on Instagram. All right, I got to close that out. All right, my manager's yelling at me. All right, scroll, 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 call, make one phone call, nobody answers. And then after an hour's worth of time goes by, yep, squirrel, right? And after an hour's worth of time goes by, you've made, I don't know, 5 phone calls, booked up 1 appointment, maybe. And then you're like, oh man, I just made an hour's worth of phone calls and nobody picked up. It's because you didn't give yourself a chance to succeed. It's important that anytime that you sit down to make phone calls, I would make phone calls in increments of 10, 15, 20, or 30. 10, 20, or 30. And it has that in your handout. And that's my suggestion for you. In school, I used to not worry about making hours worth of phone calls. I used to worry about making a number's worth of phone calls. So I would sit down on like Friday afternoons, Alex, and then I would go, all right, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to make 20 phone calls. If it takes me 10 minutes, great. I'm going to go do whatever I want for the rest of the time. If it takes me an hour, then it takes me an hour. If it takes me 2 hours, I can't move from the seat until I'm done making my 20 phone calls or I've hit my demo goal. Does everybody follow that? And by doing that, I held myself accountable to a higher level instead of, oh, I'll make some phone calls. Oh, it's been an hour. I'm going to watch some Netflix. So it's about being efficient with yourself and focusing on the right thing. And the right thing is making enough phone calls, putting in the effort necessary to get the results that you want. So if I were you, showing up to every single team meeting, I would really submit to you that you should have your top 20 ready to go so that when your manager says, all right, it's time to make phone calls, you can be like, bing, 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 and dial 20 plus phone calls during a team meeting. And then you've got cool little features like, oh, you booked them up, you completed that demo, and then you can put your demo goal and your sales goal in every single week. I've also at the bottom here, in case you want to use the schedule, I've put the next 4 weeks in here for you. And it's important that you look at your syllabi for those of you who are students and look what tests do you have coming up. How many of you have been caught unaware to a test that was coming up or a quiz that was coming up? Like you kind of didn't think about it all weekend long and then you like rolled over at like midnight, you looked at your Canvas or whatever you use for your school, you looked at your assignments or whatever, and you're like, oh crap, I have a test tomorrow. And then you had to like study late and you had to do all sorts of stuff. If you know what's coming up next week, I would really find a time every single week where you review your next week's schedule so that you know what you need to accomplish and you can make sure that that's all there. And I would give yourself a specific amount of time you have for each assignment, maybe double what you think you'll need, by the way. And then if your assignment takes longer than that, for me anyway, I was okay taking the A- or the B. If I did an assignment and I gave myself 2 hours to do it, and I knew I only had 2 hours to do it because I had other things that I had to do, if I didn't get that assignment done in 2 hours, I turned it in the way it was and I took the B. But that held me accountable. Now, some of you are 4.0 students and you're like, I can't do that, Jesse. I got to get into med school. I got to get into law school. But if you have everything else in your schedule mapped out and you've got things after that you know you have to do, you approach your schedule with a lot different intensity because you know that. And by the way, I would make your schedule so that there's no white space. Plan out everything. Put the other stuff that you want. Put your personal development. Put your should do's in there. And the last thing I'm going to share with you, white space is the devil. By the way, I remember one time I had Zachary's one of our district managers. As an assistant manager, he was spending like a lot of unproductive time at our local office. And I was like, Zachary, do something or go home. He's like, but I don't know. And so because he had put in he had in his schedule that he was supposed to be doing certain things But then there was white space. And he said he felt, how many of you felt like you're doing so much vector, but you're actually not getting the results that you want? It's because you're actually worrying more about vector than you're actually doing. So I put it in his schedule. This is your time where you're not supposed to be doing anything vector. Go do the other things that you want to do. So it's important that you plan those things out. All right. As we wrap this up, I want to share with you the principle of 1%. Can you guys see my slides here? Okay. How many of you have seen?
We don't see the slides, Jesse.
Your slides?
Just the spreadsheet.
Just the spreadsheet. All right. Well, let me reshare that. Thank you. How many of you have seen this diagram of the 1% better every day? You guys familiar with that? That's an idea that in Vector we talk about a lot. The rest of the world does too. The idea of 1% better every day. It's funny that Mike brought the atomic habits up because that's actually part of what I wanted to share with you. Is in the book, the idea of 1% every day is that you simply build habits upon which you can create the lifestyle and in the tools that you need in order to be able to be successful at whatever it is that you do. I would tell you that habits trump motivation and habits trump commitment. Like habits trump pretty much everything else. You don't rise to the level of your hopes. You always fall to the level of your habits. And so it's important that you build certain habits. And so I'm going to give you a couple keys on that. So the first thing is I wanted to bring this idea up because if you can implement habits as a student right now before the winter break starts, that's going to give you a massive amount of momentum and you'll be able to just crank that up and turn up the heat, so to speak, instead of, if you think of it like a stove, right? If you're instead of trying to get a gas stove to start when winter break starts, you're already just turning up the heat because you've already got a fire burning and you're already warm. And so I want to do a little exercise with you. I'm going to give you probably about 60 seconds, and I want you to be specific. We're going to do a start, stop, continue, which is what Mike already kind of brought up, but I want to get a little bit nitty gritty with this. The idea is I want you to, we're going to start with start. What are the things in your life? What are like one or two even simple things in your life that if you knew you started doing, it would make a drastic difference on your mental health, on your bank account, on your relationships? Go ahead and write that down. What are some of the things you need to start doing? I'll give you 15 seconds. All right. How many of you have things you know you need to start doing? How many of you have written some down? Where appropriate, right? In public sharing, go ahead and put it in the chat box if you feel comfortable with that. What are some things? Share with the rest of the group. Working out. Awesome. Go to bed. Start going to bed at a good time. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Start budgeting again. Start weekly pour hours for planning. I love that. Start waking up to a cup of coffee. I like that. Start finding gratitude in every single day. I love how these are specific. Start doing more demos. Start tracking your finances. Start budgeting your money better. Wonderful. These are all wonderful examples. Notice how they're things that when you think of it as this is what I want to start doing, that's a habit that you can create. You can check that off. So let's talk about habits that you need to stop doing. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds. Go ahead and write that down. What are some habits that you need to stop doing? Write it down in your notes. That would dramatically impact your mental health, business, school, relationships. Thank you, Lindsay. Stop Instagram scrolling. A lot of us can relate to that. Stop staying up late. Stop that darn TikTok. Okay, I'm going to pause you right there. If you feel comfortable, throw some things that you need to stop doing that would better your life in the chat box. Stop isolating. Thank you for being transparent there and vulnerable. Stop spending money. Kylie or I think that was Kylie. Kylie, I would take that a step further because you have to spend money to live. But what are you spending money on that you're not satisfied with? Maybe is it stop spending on money on booze, or stop spending money on, coffee, or stop spending money on needless wish purchases. Stop skipping meals. Stop escaping. Stop comparing. Wow. These are powerful. Thank you. Okay. And now what I want you to put down for the next 15 seconds is what habits do you need to continue doing? What is serving you right now? Sometimes this one's a hard one to think of because you kind of feel like everything in your life's going to hell. But what are some things that you need to continue doing right now that are going to serve you? Okay. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds. Chat box is blowing up. I love this. Thank you, Kirsten. Keeping your room tidy. Yeah. Keep going on walks. Keep showing up. Keep journaling. Keep working out 4 times a week. I love that, Connor. Continue exercising 3 times a week. Okay. We're getting to the end of my time here, but one of the things I wanted to show you is this, and thank you for putting this in the chat box. I really appreciate you guys being vulnerable. Is over here in the corner, you guys looking at the habit tracker? You all just created things that you need to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. And one of the most satisfying things that we can do as human beings, and one of the most honest things that we can do, is tracking that every single day in a habit tracker. How many of you like checking things off lists? I love that, man. Like that that tickles a part of my brain that's like, I feel like I am on top of the world. Right. And so when it comes to habit trackers, if I were you, I've got this mapped out all the way to Christmas, all the way to the new year, actually. Because you know what a lot of people do? They lie to themselves and they tell themselves, I'll start at the new year. My challenge to you is to start doing some habits right now. What if you rolled into the new year with momentum and you had already established new habits? And so you could work on some other stuff for New Year's. I think New Year's resolutions are kind of garbage. People wait all year. Start today. That's why it actually starts today on your habit tracker. And if I were you, maybe it's, you want something that you can start. You could put that in here. Start going to bed by 10. Maybe that's yours. And every night, Kirsten, that you go to bed by 10, check that off on your habit tracker. And one of the things that James talks about in the book is if you miss a day, there's a power in only missing one day. Don't make it 2. Get back on that ASAP. And finally, maybe it's continue. If you want to continue reaching out to your family, great. Every day that you've called somebody in your family and you've reached out or via text, go and check that off every day. And then maybe you can see patterns. The other thing about habit trackers, it keeps us honest. How many of you know that you do things and you maybe pat yourself a little bit more on the back for what you've done than maybe you should? I think we all kind of do that to some degree. And so by having habits that you want to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing, maybe it's stop spending money on needless purchases every day that goes by. Whoever said that you can, you can check, hey, how was my money spending today? All right, I did another good job. Or maybe it's every day going by that you're sober, if that's something that's important to you. So there is a habit tracker for you. And I'll simply tell you this, the simpler you can make your habit and the easier you can do to make it to show up. Oh yeah, totally. Jessica, it's in the bottom of the handout, in case you didn't catch where the template is. Yep, click on that little link and then hit make a copy and that's all yours. One of the things that I did is I made a habit of turning a page every night before I went to bed, reading 1 page. Now, reading 10 pages is awesome. Don't get me wrong. And I've also done that. But for me, I've had some really rough nights of sleep with a 7-month-old, with kids, with traveling. And so for me, the habit that I've made every night is just turning a page in a book. I read enough to turn a page in a book, and it's easy enough to show up to that. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I can read 1 page. Guess what? Most nights I usually read 5 to 15 or 20 pages. But I've showed up to that and I've been able to read 6 books this year. I haven't read that many books in the last 6 years, but it's just one small thing of showing up every single day. And so I want to challenge you that as you roll into the next 3 weeks, make the habits available of what you're doing. And thank you for your time.